Well, hello, LifeSite friends. The bomb went off 10 days ago when it was announced that because of the now infamous leak, that the Supreme Court was indeed going to vote to overturn Roe versus Wade. You know, we went immediately out to the Supreme Court. We had that reaction for you last week. And of course, it didn't take long for all the pro-aborts to completely lose their minds over this. They threatened violence, and indeed they acted on that violence, where several Catholic churches over the weekend were vandalized, masses interrupted. But in the midst of all of this, as they're sending out their notices, trying to get people to show up at churches, out of nowhere, the Thomas More Society, the great law firm that represents Catholics and people of faith, they represented David Daleiden. I'm sure you've heard a lot about these heroic Catholic attorneys who step into these situations, and they usually win, of course. They sent out a press release that was just amazing. It was like kaboom! All of a sudden, Thomas More comes out and says, all right, if you people want to do this, then you are going to face legal action, because guess what? It's against the law to trespass. It's against the law to vandalize. And I am so delighted to welcome right now from beautiful San Diego, California, Paul Jonna of the Thomas More Society, one of the authors of the press release that went out last week. Paul, welcome to LifeSite News, my friend.
Great to be with you. Thank you, Jim.
Paul, what motivated you to write that press release last week?
So there was actually a letter that we sent to this organization, Ruth sent us, and along with the press release. And basically, once we became aware that this group existed, we decided to notify them that there's severe legal penalties for what they're planning to do. And so it was a letter that was signed on to by Tom Brecka, the president of the Thomas More Society, as well as my partner, Chuck Lemandry, and myself. And we sent the letter May 6th, just warning them that these planned disruptions are illegal. And we were aware that they'd already disrupted Mass at the Cathedral of St. Mary of the Assumption on February 28th of this year. And basically, this group is an extremist group that, besides encouraging and participating in disruptions during Mass, they've also recently published the home addresses of the 6 Supreme Court justices on the conservative side, and they're advocating for protests outside their house. The White House expressed disapproval about that, but they've also recently threatened that they'd burn the Eucharist. So there's a lot more I could say, but basically, when we found out about this group, we thought we'd immediately put them on notice that if they actually proceed with any of this illegal conduct, they can be subject to substantial legal penalties and civil liability as well.
Well, Paul, and this is religious bigotry, at its core. Like, how do they think they can get away with this stuff? That's what's just so mind-boggling, because you can always apply the double standard, right? If some kind of Catholic group or some kind of conservative Christians of any kind behaved in this way at all, I mean, everyone would be aghast. These would be Nazis. This would be, finally it took the White House like 5 days to say, no, we condemn this behavior. But first of all, Paul, I just want to thank you for doing this on behalf of, all of our staff and all LifeSite readers. Thank you so much, because what I actually thought, Paul, is that it might have been a lot worse had you guys not sent that letter out.
Well, we did notice that thank you, Jim. We did notice that the disruptions on Mother's Day weekend weren't as organized or as, severe as we were expecting, which is good. But, I think it's beyond just religious bigotry. I think this is, in my view, domestic terrorism. Yep. If you look into these groups, the Ruth sent us group, for example, they're trying to stay anonymous. We're not exactly sure who's in the group. They describe themselves as not really a unified organization, but a loose coalition of grassroots activists with a network across the country. They seem to be, though, connected to this revolutionary communist party and a group led by this cult-like leader, Bob Avakian, and this other group's called Rise for Abortion Rights and Vigil for Democracy. And so, they've been the rise for abortion rights has been involved in church disruptions along with revolutionary communists. There's a leader there, Soon Surah Taylor, who I think LifeSite News has reported on in the past. And they've advocated that the US government be overthrown by violent revolution. So these are not peaceful protesters. These are extremists and frankly, domestic terrorists. I mean, on Mother's Day weekend, we saw that a Molotov cocktail was thrown in the office of a pro-life group in Wisconsin. And there was graffiti on the building threatening that if abortions aren't safe, then you aren't either. And in Texas, a tabernacle was stolen from a Catholic church this last weekend, and there was vandalization and other acts of hate in several different states. So these are, if you look at the FBI definition of domestic terrorism, it's basically fits right in to that definition. Dangerous acts intended to intimidate and coerce the civilian population and intended to influence the policy of government by intimidation or coercion. So I think it's time that we label these groups what they are, which is domestic terrorists.
So, Paul, what is your advice to Catholic parishes or pro-life groups? Obviously, they need to have security cameras so we can try to capture these domestic terrorists on camera. But how do you advise people like us, for example? We have an office here in Front Royal. So what would you say to us?
Well, so it's important that everyone understands there is a federal law, the FACE Act, and that stands for Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances Act. Ironically, that was a bill pushed by pro-abortion activists, signed into law by Bill Clinton. It was really intended to protect abortion clinics from interference by people that were, outside praying and protesting, not praying, but, So, but the law also includes a provision that protects, from interference at religious worship services, and so it's a pretty solid law in that sense. And so people need to be aware that anyone who disrupts a religious service is basic in a way that we're seeing here with physical obstruction or obviously with violence. But even if it's not violent, but there's physical obstruction, there's intimidation, there's attempts to intimidate, all that would subject that person to civil liability. So what people should do is remain calm, obviously call the police, document the incident if they can by recording it or have someone else do that, and then contact us at the Thomas More Society, and we'll see if we can take action in the civil courts. But I think that would be the best course of action. Obviously, stay vigilant and make sure there's a security team at your parish or at your organization so that you guys can have a plan. But the good news is there is legal recourse for this kind of conduct, separate and apart from criminal liability. There's civil liability for these people as well.
So, did you hear anything back from this group?
We have not, and we've realized that they're not the only group here. Like, as I've noted, there's a rise for abortion rights and other groups, and we're going to be sending out letters to all of them this week. So, whether they respond or not is that's kind of irrelevant. What we want to make sure is that they don't interfere with any worship services, and if they do, we want to take action against them, regardless of what state it is, because Thomas More Society has a network of lawyers across the United States. And we happen to be in California, but there's lawyers in many states across the U.S. And so you guys can, anyone can visit our website and reach out if there's any disruptions at any worship services, and we'll look into getting involved.
Paul, it seems a little overly coincidental that all of a sudden this group Ruth sent us just suddenly appears like 2 days after the leak is leaked. It all sounds rather coordinated. Could I just get you to comment on this being leaked out? Obviously somebody who works at the Supreme Court, probably a clerk. What do you think that is all about?
So let me just back up for a second and say that pro-abortion extreme groups have been planning for this for a while. So it largely had been understood that the Supreme Court was going to dismantle Roe versus Wade. I mean, all legal scholars basically were taking the view that Roe versus Wade was going to be overruled. And the groups on the other side were very much aware of this and planning for this. And for example, in California, Governor Newsom, back in September of 2021, formed this group called the California Future of Abortion Council. And their stated mission was to make California an abortion sanctuary state. And so they have all this legislation that they were planning on, basically even legalizing infanticide in AB 2223. But the point is, they were planning for this, and they were getting ready for how to respond if Roe versus Wade would be overruled.
Sure.
And so this didn't just happen overnight. These groups were planning, coordinating. As far as the leak, the draft opinion was the draft opinion that was leaked was actually authored in February. So obviously it seems very likely that a clerk, maybe one of the justices' clerks, was involved in this. And I think that in and of itself is an act of is a terrorist act also, by the way. I mean, it's unprecedented in the history of our country, a case of this magnitude to be leaked to, basically as a way of intimidating the conservative justices to change their opinion. I think that's egregious and needs to be very thoroughly investigated and prosecuted, because I think that's a very big, undermines the integrity of our judicial system. It threatens the safety of our Supreme Court justices. It really threatens to undermine the rule of law in our country. So I think it's a very serious act that needs to be very thoroughly investigated. So.
Yeah, Paul, my sense on this is that, once again, the left has gone too far, and they think that this is an opportunity for them to mobilize their side because of the blubbering fool they have in the White House right now, and inflation, and they know they're doomed in November. But I have got to believe that just decent Americans are not going to be happy at all with what's already happened. And you got to think that once we get the actual vote, once it is officially overturned, that, we could be looking at another summer, another historic summer of riots and all kinds of violence at that part. So what is your sense just on how they have gone too far? Do you agree with that?
I mean, the devil always overplays his hand, and I think in this case, my personal prediction, obviously we need to keep praying and fasting and hoping that this will come to fruition, but my personal prediction is that Roe versus Wade will be overturned by the Supreme Court, and there's really not much they can do about it. I mean, they can't. There's talk today about a vote to codify Roe versus Wade. Well, that won't go anywhere. There's no votes for that in the Senate. Plus, there's really no legal basis to do that. They can't really add Supreme Court justices. They're stuck with Roe versus Wade being overturned. It's amazing. And I think that we need to be very, obviously we have to wait and see how the final ruling looks. But if that does happen, which I think it will, it's a very, very big deal. It's a very significant positive step in the right direction for our country. But yes, no question about it. This summer, and the other side, the extreme end of the other side, I should say, is gonna try to burn everything to the ground again, like they did 2 years ago. But it'll be worse. It'll be worse. But I don't think they'll be able to change the result. I don't think they'll be able to, I think that'll just expose the pro-abortion extremists for who they are. And I think it'll just alienate them even more. And I think in the long run, that'll be a very unsuccessful strategy. So I think it'll be a temporary chaos in our country. I don't think it's going to lead to anything, significant, but who knows? But I do think that this is overall great news for our country in terms of this decision being reversed. And we just have to hope and pray that the final decision looks like the draft one.
Amen to that, Paul. Gosh. Well, so are you able at this point? Do you have enough evidence to go after anyone that has committed a crime in the last 10 days yet, or? Are you looking at things? Have you been contacted?
We are doing a lot of research. We haven't prepared to file a case yet, but I would encourage LifeSite News viewers and people who are concerned about this issue to contact us. Let us know if there is an issue where they live, and we'll definitely look into it very seriously. But so far, we're kind of in the investigation research phase of this. Haven't prepared to file a case yet, but we are ready and able to as soon as we find out that there's evidence of a violation. So.
Yep. Okay. Finally, Paul, I just got to ask you. So if I'm at Mass and I see these lunatics coming into Mass and they're disrupting and they're doing all their crazy stuff, I mean, can I physically remove them, body slam them if I have to? Like, what is your recommendation for those who are confronting these people, like when they come into church?
So I will say that I'm a civil trial lawyer. I don't handle, the criminal realm of things, but generally speaking, you can defend yourself, use physical force to defend yourself or to defend others. I would say you would probably be running into some gray area if you tried to physically remove someone, but without a threat of physical force that, being made towards you. So I think that's why it's very important for churches to sort of, they can, I think, in most cases, refuse entry to people that are suspicious. So they don't have to let them inside the church. Oh. But once they're in the church, I think that you'd probably run into some issues if you physically remove someone who's not threatening you physically. So I think, though, that churches can, refuse entry, and that's something that they should look into.
That's really wise, because I think there were a bunch of good old boys here in Front Royal that were just hoping some of them were going to show up on Sunday, and they weren't going to get a very warm welcome. I can tell you that. But
I can imagine, and I don't blame them for feeling that way. But I would say, yeah, to play it safe, it's using physical force is probably,
But you're right. I mean, if you see a pack of those women with those ridiculous red outfits on, just shut the doors and say you can't come in.
Let them in and call the police.
Amen. Well, Paul, I know you're a busy man, and once again, thank you so much for taking the action that you took. I think that press release was so encouraging to so many people. I mean, we had it up, front and center, lead story on LifeSite. And I just think that was, it's like we've been waiting for somebody to take the initiative like that. And God bless you, brother, for doing it.
Thank you, Jim. It was a team effort, but we are happy to do it. That's why we're here at the Thomas More Society. So thank you for covering it.
All right. Paul Jonna from the Thomas More Society with us today from California. Paul, thanks so much. And I hope we'll be able to check back in with you as things develop, sir.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jim. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Paul.